the monarchy rather than the Queen, I thought it would be appropriate to slip in a little soft power warning in amongst all of the grief and sorrow. Scholarship on authoritarian soft power argues its aim is to normalise a country's practices and culture worldwide, and no institution has been more successful at this than the British monarchy. As you'd expect, the monarchy doesn't exactly represent Britain as such, but it does represent the interests of a select subgroup of British culture and the image that they hope to portray, at home and abroad, of Britishness. It's also worth mentioning that this subgroup educates its children at the same schools and the same two universities. It passes down hereditary wealth as well as political power, and that it doesn't really consider itself part of the diverse, seething masses that make up the British public. The monarchy represents, as it was designed to, Britain's centre of political power, what political scientists would call the regime, which means it seeks to normalise the culture of this subgroup as integral to Britishness, and it uses textbook authoritarian arguments to do so. That's just the way it's always been. It can't argue with tradition, and it works. Despite everything done in the Queen's name to the working classes at home and the other masses abroad, in the hours since the Queen's death, strikes have been called off by major unions, and Extinction Rebellion have cancelled much-needed protests, showing a level of genuine respect that Britain's workers and activists could never hope to receive from either the monarchy or the regime it represents. Remember, the regime and its government refuse to find the funds to lift the millions of families using food banks out of food insecurity, yet you can guarantee it's going to find a way to fund this funeral and the subsequent coronation on behalf of a family with more material wealth than most British people can even visualise. And we won't be allowed to criticise out of respect for our dearly departed monarch. The death of the
I mean, it's what you'd call an imagined community, right? Like this idea of adhering to something as something kind of metaphysical, such as the idea of Britishness. It's why with that tweet we showed of Ash Sarkar previously, where people were trying to say that she can't be part of the culture because of the color of her skin, right? Because because she doesn't believe in the monarchy, she can and is the wrong color. She can therefore be excised from the imagined community. And and as Abby says here, it's a really good way of maintaining soft power against working people, because as soon as you are against the establishment, as soon as you criticize the systems and structures that are in place, they can then accuse you of being anti-British and then again extradite you from the imagined community of quote unquote Britishness, right? That's what they can do. Yeah, Abby's super fucking good. You should open bookshelf on TikTok. Well worth following. So it's really important. It's really interesting. In the way that you can stymie people engaging in action for working people, because the dominant power structures can use the imagined community of Britishness. We'll say, well, hang on a minute. Again, it's the same time when you get people who will say things like, well, if you don't like the country, you can leave. Or if you think that Denmark is so good, like Denmark's economy is so good, why didn't you move there? Right? All that kind of shit. Because as soon as you say that a other country might do something better than we can, especially if it's in grounds on making things better for working people outside of the dominant power structure, they can then accuse you of you not showing loyalty to the imagined community that you're a part of. It's the same way as you saying that you're a socialist. People tell you hate America if you're in the United States, because again, once you deviate from the prescribed ideology of the prescribed cultural ideology, and you engage in quote unquote wrongthink, you can then be excised from this quote unquote imagined community, which is stronger, right? Obviously, people on the left will do that same kind of thing too, where you need to be able to commit to some kind of specific ideology to maintain, say, part of the movement. But that is an actual community, unlike Britishness, which is just an imagined community that is used to maintain the soft power structure.
Queen gives our new freshly minted Tory PM the perfect excuse to rush through further authoritarian legislation. And given that she plans to demolish the rights of workers and unions within her first 30 days in office, I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that she's going to do just that and more with the free pass the Queen's death gives her. The monarchy?
It's a really good way to maintain some level of political power as well. Like the amount of which you'll say, well, you can't criticize the government, you can't do this, you can't do that, because we are too busy mourning the monarch, right? And when you look at this kind of soft power and how it can exert itself, there's Henry Bolton OBE guy, fucking literally the craziest person on Twitter, the guy who was saying that he got fucking angry about there being foreign food stalls on by the River Thames or some shit. Absolute crazy shit. It's apparent that most British schools no longer teach their pupils the national anthem or fly the Union flag. The same way like America does, right? This loyalty to the nation state. You ask Liz Truss and Kit Mulhouse to issue an instruction to all schools to rectify this mission and to do so prior to Queen Elizabeth II's funeral. Literally, wanting to make sure that this cultural hegemony gets repeated and the education system can indoctrinate people using state propaganda. Like, they're not teaching people about the national anthem or what the Union flag represents or anything about that. They are just saying they're just trying to indoctrinate people into being part of the imagined community that it represents. Like, do you see what I mean? Like, in this, because the way in which people criticize my point of view here is they'll come back to me and say, well, hang on a minute, well, you believe that schools should teach critical race theory. You believe that people should be taught about gay relationships and about trans people, about gender ideology, etc., etc. Right? But teaching people about a certain set of ideologies, teaching people about some theory is not the same as indoctrinating people into this kind of cult of the British imagined community. Because we're teaching, when kids are taught about critical race theory, they're taught about talk about something theoretically, a bunch of precepts, a bunch of ideas, and a bunch of new theories, and a bunch of, rather than being prescribed an ideology, being part of an ideology, and being prescribed a culture through an institution of the state that the school is, right? People are allowed to disagree in class. If someone says something to do with critical race theory, you can say, well, I don't believe in XYZ for this reasons, with some kind of ideological backup. But forcing people to sing the national anthem or fly the Union flag forces people to be part of that community to begin with, and it's difficult to then question that, right? If people want to form their own groups in school, whatever, and then sing the national anthem, they're very welcome to do so. But that is still it being forced upon them through kind of state power, that is indoctrination. Again, the reason why people like this want to do it is because they want to maintain this imagined community that allows them to keep some level of power using the authoritarian methods that Abby Heffer described in the video that we just watched. Yeah, too many curry houses on the Thames. That's literally what it was. It was crazy shit. Let me find it. It was unreal scenes. Let me find it. He might have deleted it. I hope he has. I hope he's been embarrassed enough to delete it. This is the one. Sadly, there's a bunch of tacky pop-up fast food stores along the Thames at the Tower of London. Okay, I realised back in the day all sorts of traders would have frequented here, but Middle East falafels and Nashville hot chicken? He's even making himself sound as racist as possible here. Like, his point here is that it was okay when it was British food, but now that it's foreign muck, I can't actually have that there. Literally, you are shouting at food, Henry. Like, it's just not, again, just literally being just like, hang on a minute, we just need to have, again, it's all imagined community bullshit. You have to be part of the imagined community to be acceptable, and it is always used as an excuse for racism. I'll go back to the Ash Sarkar tweet from before, right? Let me bring it up. Here's the one. So her original tweet, was about how you're not allowed to be British. You can't be British just for holding a passport unless you're part of. Again, she says the part of the culture and civilization. But what this person actually means is specifically part of the imagined community of Britishness, right? That's what this person specifically believes talking about it. And then, and why is it specifically that someone who's anti-monarchy, right, is being targeted? Why is it specifically someone who is of Bengali heritage is being targeted by this? Because the imaginary community exists to be able to perpetuate the racist structures that this conquistador lives matter person of all fucking things seems to want to believe in. Calm down, Henry. You're not going to win the worst Henry award. Kissinger has that one on lock already. Yeah, true, very true. Hindu nationalists are an imagined community. 100%. 100%. That's why when, for example, I did a segment on this previously when we're talking about how there are Hindu nationalists on Twitter who will claim that you're being Hindu phobic if you say that they can't force Muslim women to stop wearing a veil. right? That was literally being caught. That was literally being chastised on Twitter as being Hindu phobic because there was a woman because there was an anti-veil law, anti-veil rule being passed, and there were people talking about that. Well, the reason why this exists is because of the Hindu nationalist government that wants to maintain cultural hegemony using the imagined community of Hindu nationalism, right? So when people then criticize that and say, well, no, this is the internationalism is why you're engaging in this, authoritarian policing of people's clothing choices within the Islamic community. The reason why they do that is because they want to be able to maintain the imagined community, and that's why Hindu nationalism is so fucking toxic in India.
I could tell you that the monarchy is undemocratic, and it is, but so is lots of stuff. Our electoral system, House of Lords, for instance. Hell, Theresa May was Prime Minister of the country for a whole year before ever winning a general election. She wasn't even elected to be the leader of her own party because members
But
of
also just because I think what we've seen over the past 4 days or whatever, we've seen that people don't care about democracy. People don't give a shit about democracy. They're absolutely fine with things being anti-democratic. They're okay with the head of state being anti-democratic. They're okay with the prime minister being put into power reasonably anti-democratically. They're okay with the House of Lords existing anti-democratically, and they're okay with their workplace being anti-democratic as well. They do not care about democracy, and they do not have a axiomatic belief in it. And that's where we need, as far as I'm concerned, if we want to convince people, we have to get people sold on the idea of new democratic mandates, for example. That's why I absolutely fucking despise it when liberals talk about something like they get angry at things like populism, when really all left populism is an inherent belief in the idea of democracy and quote unquote the will of the people.